Welcome to Making Your Miles Count Production, an educational program to all Canadian lease owner-operators with your host, Robert Scaper.
Welcome to Making Your Miles Count podcast, and today we're going to do a little bit of ranting. And the podcast is called Taxes, Taxes, Taxes. It has absolutely nothing to do with my first book, which is Making Your Miles Count, Taxes, Taxes, Taxes. So I just want a warning right up front. But we are going to be talking a little bit about taxes and the Canadian tax system as a whole and the history of it. I'm a big believer in understanding the history of something in order to fully deal with any particular subject. How exactly did we get to where we are? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of explaining on something that every truck driver, owner-operator especially, should understand, and that is fuel tax. Fuel tax, simply put, is a provincial or state tax that is assigned to every volume of fuel that is sold, whether it's liters or U.S. gallons. Every province, for instance, has a certain assigned cents per liter that is assigned for a fuel tax. You have to pay for it. It's actually it would be probably considered of some sort as a user tax, because the more you use it, the more you pay. I chose a fuel tax to be the starting point of this discussion because it's actually in my opinion, it's a very good tax. If you go back, it's a little bit more than 100 years now, probably 120 years ago, the roads in Canada, or actually in the States as well, the roads were not much better than some of them. A lot of them are not much better than cow paths. Sort of grass in between the two ruts kind of a thing. And between, say, Toronto and Montreal, there's probably, pretty good. But it's all gravel of some sort and size. Not very much traveled at all back and forth. Actually, there's a lot of freight that went back and forth, I'm sure, but not very fast because everything was hauled by horses and carts and oxen and whatever exactly pulled things around back then. The fastest you would ever get on any vehicle would determine entirely on the horse that you buy and how fast that thing can go. And so realistically, when Henry Ford started making automobiles mass production, the need at the time was, hey, we got to upgrade our roads. We actually not just upgrade our roads, but we have to make bridges and even make roads from one location to the next. And so the governing authorities at the time says, well, what do we do if we and the brilliance behind what they did was they said, well, we have to do a user tax. It's like a toll road, except there you don't take it at the toll at some booth going onto the road. They figured, well, wait a minute, everybody else uses horses and buggies and stuff like that, but everybody who wants automobiles, they have to buy fuel, whether it's gas or diesel or whatever. Well, it would be gas at that time, and if we tax it at the pump, then only the people who use it for an automobile purposes, which is the reason why we're upgrading the roads to start off with, they're the ones who are going to be paying for the upgrades, which is actually a very reasonable response to a need, because back 120 years ago, the transportation from different provinces and different areas, the roads were terrible. You think our roads are terrible now? It's awful back then, and so taxing at the pump it was a great alternative. Now, just to put this a little bit into perspective, gasoline at the time was actually It's a byproduct. Because what they did was they took oil and they processed it, and what they were trying to get out of it is kerosene, which and that's where the real value in the oil was, because kerosene, you could now have kerosene lamps and you'd have light, and you didn't have to burn wax or whale oil or anything like this. Brought productivity great up. It was a much higher or whatever, and so it was a very good thing. The byproduct that processing plants actually had from processing oil into kerosene was gasoline. They used to actually dump gasoline into rivers and then just light it and let it burn off, because it was a useless commodity. And so when Henry Ford or these other guys said, "Hey, wait a minute, gasoline is a great combustion. Let's make gasoline engines and use it for cars." And so suddenly you had the oil industry becoming basically twice as valuable, because now a throwaway byproduct is now just as valuable as the kerosene or diesel that they made. So that's a little bit of the history on it. So gasoline actually phenomenally cleaned up the environment, like gasoline engines, should I say, because what else would they do with this gasoline? So is a interesting transition period back then. So actually, when it really comes down to it, if you're looking to bring eliminate automobiles, what's going to happen is, let's say they would actually do that and say, okay, we're not 80% of all vehicles are not gasoline anymore. Well, gasoline consumption would go way down, but you still need diesel to haul through the roads or whatever, and you'd have now a whole bunch of, what are they going to do with gasoline then? Like there is a balance between gasoline and diesel in the market at all times, and they're trying to create that balance. Now maybe they can do some other things with it. I don't know, make plastic plants or something. I don't know. But that being said, I mean it was actually very efficient, to have both gasoline and diesel both together, or gasoline and kerosene. But anyway, that being said, they started collecting fuel tax. It's actually, I don't know if they called it fuel tax, but because technically it's not really a tax. It's actually a user fee. That's what the original design was, a user fee. And so it's all governed provincially. So the province of Ontario collects fuel tax at all of the different locations that they sell it. And in Ontario, for instance, last year they collected $8 billion in fuel tax. Now, it wasn't obviously that much originally when they first came out with it. It would be just hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever, maybe even tens of thousands the first little while, and then more and more and more. And but they had a huge demand for roads and bridges and stuff like this. So it was decades and decades and decades of collecting this user fee before the roads were a lot more mature. Actually, there was a huge move in the 60s to upgrade all the roads in North America. Just massive. They spent unbelievable amount of money. And then once that was done, that was pretty much it. Now they just pretty much had to maintain those roads, which is all well and good. But then some bureaucrat somewhere said, "Wait a minute, we're still collecting all of this fuel tax to pay for all of these new building or new bridges and roads and stuff like this, but they're not new anymore. Now we just have to maintain it. We don't need to collect nearly as much." But instead of lowering the user fee, they actually made a subtle change. And they said that it's not going to be a user fee. It's actually just everything will be deposited into the general fund of the province or the state. Now, which province and which state actually started this, I actually don't know. And probably I'm not interested in knowing which one, because that was 50, 60 years ago, and who cares? They're probably all dead anyway. But that being said, that subtle little change made an immense difference on the province's finances. Now they collected money like crazy, but they didn't have to spend it all on the roads, because prior to that, every penny that came in had to go out to roads and bridges. And that little change was a boondog for every province. Once that started, it was they had no intention of ever lowering the fuel tax, because it really it was counterproductive to a bureaucrat or to the government saying, "Hey, why would we give up money?" Because nobody even knows that we're collecting it. They don't see it every day, kind of a thing. So that went on for quite some time, and the fuel tax itself. We collect, in my second book, I have charts actually in there showing the difference between how much Canada collects in fuel taxes versus the United States. And it's almost twice as much in Canada as they do in the States. And it's almost, if you take a look at all of the taxes for Canada and all of the taxes for the United States, Canada pays almost twice as much as the United States does. Now, there is some things that I'm not making universal statements in here, because we have a universal health care that pays for hospitals and stuff like that, and so has to be a little bit, maybe 10-12% difference, have to accommodate that, because generally speaking, if people move from Canada to the United States, their first thing they notice is, hey, they're going to make an extra 20% on their earnings, but then they also have to realize anywhere from 10 to 15% goes to healthcare. So exactly, maybe not as much. That varies quite a bit, but there is a clawback on healthcare costs as well on there. So it's hard to compare apples to apples when it comes to taxes. But generally speaking, a very good example being the fuel tax. Canada collects twice as much in fuel tax as United States. There are other taxes too that we have that they don't have. We have GST. Now we have carbon tax, but there's a whole bunch of other taxes, and generally our taxes are much higher than the United States. But that being said, the growth of taxes is a topic. I mean, there's probably a lot of people who could give a lot more in-depth conversation on taxes, but just from a general perspective, what I have noticed is whenever there is an issue, whenever there's a story, something that shocks the community or something like that, or whether it's real or imagined, the government knee-jerk reaction is, "Oh, we got to tax that." So we're gonna tax it. Probably the biggest example from do you remember this or not? Like the tire tax. Were you around before the tire tax? You probably weren't.
I think I remember it vaguely.
It actually came after a fire that occurred in Ontario. Somebody had collected hundreds of thousands of tires, maybe even millions of tires, and stacked them up like crazy. And the story is, and I can't confirm it, the story is either the city or the municipality or the province or whatever was coming after the guy to clean them up. And there was almost no use for tires back then. They didn't recycle them back then. They had no use for them. And apparently some kids came in, threw some gasoline on and started a fire. Now, that's apparently, allegedly, or whatever, and it started burning. Well, there's absolutely no way, once tires start going, there's no way in the world you can just water bomb that thing out. So it was just horrendous. It burned for a couple of weeks. And the actual story itself got all around the world. It was told in Europe and in this place and all over the place. All Canada's on fire with tires or whatever. and the politicians were, oh, this is a terrible thing. There's a terrible thing. So what are we going to do to solve this gross problem? Blah blah blah. Yeah. And of course, they come out with a tire tax. Now, the strange thing is, when a government comes out and says, "Hey, this is a problem. Let's fix it with a tax," does it actually fix the problem or not? Probably not.
Well, I guess in this case, what were they expecting the tax to do?
Yeah.
Like, the tires are still going to be there, taxed or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're taxing it at when you sell when you're purchasing it.
Yeah, a purchase tax.
That's right.
It's not like a disposal fee or something
No.
like that. Though there might be in Canada someplace where you're disposing it.
You know what? I
costs
can't
you
remember
something.
the last time I bought tires. Now, there used to be like you'd buy it and there was a tax on there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But there was I've had it a couple times where I've had tires replaced. And there's a disposal fee on there yet too.
That's a little bit has to do with who you buy it from, and what condition it's in.
But
the tax is one thing, and then you get a disposal fee.
Disposable.
So it's two taxes.
It's two taxes.
But
it's not really a tax. Disposable fee. That would be like some tire dealership saying, "Hey, I got to dispose of this."
Yeah.
And in order for me to dispose it, I have to charge you XYZ.
Yeah, but
not everybody charges
isn't
it.
That what the tax is for?
I guess in theory.
In originally the tax was because we have to deal with these tires.
Yeah.
So we'll charge you a tax, and then we will deal with the tires, and then when I put on new ones, well, I have to get rid of these tires. So I'm going to charge you because we have to get rid of the tires, and then the tax will take care of like I'm paying for it twice.
Yeah. So realistically, when the government says, "Hey, let's tax this situation," they're not really solving anything, because really that tire tax, it goes into the general fund. I remember, I think it was Ontario that was the first province that had the tire tax, and I remember, it was about a year or maybe even 2 years before the yelling and screaming of Ontario tire salesmen or whatever got to, and the ripple effect that other provinces now started with the tire tax. Mm-hmm. And it was done. Because what was happening was, well, goodness sakes, everybody has the exact same cost. Whether it was in New Brunswick or in Manitoba or Ontario, the base cost for a tire, let's say it's $100. Well, if I buy it in New Brunswick or Manitoba rather than Ontario, I save myself the $5 tire tax. Yeah. So everybody was buying it in a different province. Yeah. And so I remember that happening, because I remember I had a client who was and we were discussing it. Or it wasn't a client. It was probably just another owner operator, because I probably was driving at the time. Mm-hmm. I should know these dates, but anyway, so I said, "Oh no, you just go to a different jurisdiction and you buy them there. You could just trade them in and whatever." Yeah. And so people were getting around the tire tax, and Ontario yelled and screamed, and I guess that's why they have provincial meetings. When they get all of the provincial, what do you call them, premiers, premier meetings, they could get all together and say, "Hey, listen, everybody, we all want you to start doing tire tax." Yeah. And so they
all have to steal in the same direction.
Yeah. And probably that's very much what occurred with the fuel tax as well. They probably started in Ontario, and then premier in New Brunswick or Manitoba said, "Hey, wait a minute, that's we need roads and bridges too." And it's like a cold. It sort of spreads along that lines, or some disease, whatever, leprosy, zombie, anyway, whatever. So realistically, that's how the tire tax spread. But tire tax, it's not in the States, is it? I haven't been there in a long time. There might be some places.
I haven't bought tires in the States for a long time.
Because I know there were some guys for a while, depending on the exchange rate.
Yeah.
They would get all their tires in the States.
Oh, I did. This was maybe 15 years ago, I did for a short term. I bought them there, but that was I only did that. I heard a couple guys doing that, and like you said, the exchange rate
It
was
has
at
to
a
be right.
spot
Yeah.
where the most of the advantage was the exchange.
Yeah.
And away we went that way. But
Yeah.
that, I guess the government heard about that and changed something.
No,
I don't know.
But yeah, so it's straight, like, I guess, supply and demand,
Yeah.
and truck drivers aren't stupid. Like, owner operators aren't stupid. If there's a tax in one place, they're going to avoid it and go somewhere else. In that regards. And there are other realistically, like I was saying before, the tire tax, it doesn't go to actually fix the tire problem. Maybe a small portion. They can say, okay, look what we're doing here, and there's all the tire tax. It just goes into a general fund. And whether it solves the tires or tax or not, they don't care. Or maybe realistically, they probably don't care. Their words would probably say they care. Obviously, they would. But there's other taxes too, like environmental levies. You go to Costco and you buy, a monitor or a TV or something like that.
Yeah.
A computer, a laptop. There's environmental levies. Well, what exactly is that for? I think, if I remember right, it had to do with dumps. City dumps, and so it's there to clean up the dump.
I think they were concerned about some of the plastics and toxins in the computers that were leaching into the dumps or something.
Was it not the plastics? It was the silver and all of the things for the circuitry and stuff like that.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, because they made it sound like it was an environmental disaster.
Yeah.
Like we can't have this in our dumps. It's just polluting everything.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know whether that,
has it really solved anything?
No.
No, everybody just said, no.
You just throw it somewhere else
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
On the road, just before you get to the dump, you dump it out there, and then
if you go to the dump, most people have it at the end of the road, like at the end of their driveway or so. But or find some dumpster and throw it in the bottom of a dumpster, it's but it's a tax, and it goes into the general fund, and so they can do whatever they want with that money. As an example, last year Ontario collected $8 billion in fuel tax, and they only spent $2.6 billion on roads and bridges. So all the rest of the $5+ billion, just what does that actually do? Does that
And the interesting thing is now, with electric vehicles, they're starting to complain that we're not going to have enough revenue anymore because these vehicles, there's no gas.
If anybody thinks that they're not going to be taxed with an EV, they are just careful what you smoke, because it is killing your brain cells. That's not how things work in Canada, or probably as much even in the States sometimes.
Well, and first they give you a tax credit to buy the EV, and then later they'll tax it.
I can foresee an unbelievable amount of problems. They say, listen, our power grid can't handle this, and so we're only giving you so many kilowatts, and then we pare it down. You can't do this, you can't do that. No, my goodness. That's why I have wood stove at home. Because I can't be dependent on whether they're going to allow me to do, take a trip to the city or not, or around the city or not. It's I can foresee all sorts of regulatory problems with an EV that you just don't have with gasoline or diesel.
there may be some. For me, I've been listening and watching all these taxes and whatever everything has some sort of environmental tag to it, or it's no longer, what, we need to tax because this is going to help the country, and I haven't heard of anybody wanting to increase the tax for our military. Like that, like there is no military tax.
Well, that's one of those
to save our
discretionary
country.
things. They can say, well, we'll do this, or
Yeah.
we'll do that. It's
Yeah.
not their toy. If it's
No,
not their
but
toy, then they don't do it.
It's not a hot button for everybody either. Like we're not going to. Who's going to invade Canada?
Yes.
Nobody has enough parkas.
Like, find the country with the most amount of parkas.
Yeah, if you got enough parkas, you can't hold a gun proper anyway.
Yeah.
And you can't bring them across the border anyway. So what are they going to do?
So
Sorry,
what?
that was-
Yeah.
Mhm.
Good point. Needlessly, no. Sorry.
Yeah.
Good point. Anyway, what I want to continue to say that Canada has been on the teetering of a tax revolt, on and off for about 45, somewhere between 40 and 50 years. The first real tax revolt or pushback on taxes came, at least that I know of, came in the 70s, where it's a tax revolt, but also there was far too much regulation on the average individual. And in the trucking industry, in the 70s, people started lobbying and saying, because the entire trucking industry used to be completely regulated. To get your running rights, you couldn't, you just didn't fill it out the form and go and suddenly you can start your own trucking firm. It was highly regulated by the government, federally, provincially, everything. Sometimes you could only get permits for certain roads during certain times. There's all sorts of restrictions. It was just bizarre beyond belief. Some of the things in the regulatory environment in the trucking in the 70s. So there was a big move to deregulate. Now, some of that occurred at the early 80s when Ronald Reagan came in, and they were discussing NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, and the Canadians wanted in on some of the U.S. freight. And so what they said is, well, there's no way in the world our regulatory system is going to allow us to compete with the U.S. market. So we have to deregulate the entire trucking industry so that we can go into the United States and compete dollar for dollar like that. So one of the major things is actually the entire there was, prior to the 70s, to my understanding, there was no Canadian Trucking Alliance. There was only provincial trucking alliances or provincial trucking associations, and they each had their own little fiefdom that they work. And there was some cooperation between, but very limited. Actually, it's much easier even today to do trade with the United States than it is sometimes between different provinces. It's like little fiefdoms. Like everybody has their own control. It's like little kingdoms set up. Each province has their own little kingdom or so. But back then, it was very difficult, and they said, okay, now as one, if we're going to all compete with the U.S. freight, which they thought was a very good idea, and I still probably think is a good idea because it's in and out of Canada or so. They said, okay, we're going to do that. And one of the first thing that they did was they organized Canadian Trucking Alliance. This is how I understand it. Boy, if somebody wants to correct me, then by all means. One of the first things that the Canadian Trucking Alliance actually did, at least publicly, was change the way truckers got paid. Prior to the 70s or before deregulation, the entire trucking industry, drivers got paid two different ways. They got paid cents per mile, and they got a per diem, a meal allowance per day. Some of it, 15, usually about $20, $25, $30 per day. Maybe not that much, but whatever the rate were back then. I remember because when I first got into trucking, and this was in 1989 or 90, my wife and I, we were asking different trucking companies what they pay and what to do and stuff like that. And they would say, yeah, we'll give you, if I remember, it was 25 cents a mile, but that includes your meals. They were still trying to train the entire industry not to ask that secondary question, because prior to that, everybody says, okay, you give me so much per mile. How much is your per diem per day? And the per diem was non-taxable benefits. It was a great deal. Our entire firm is based on that history of paying non-taxable benefits. And so that was how they moved everything over. That was the one major thing that the Canadian Trucking Alliance did, probably even the first thing nationally that they did, was move people away from the non-taxable benefits, move the drivers away from non-taxable benefits, and they embraced the TL2 simplified method, which prior to that was only a form that was used in the railroad industry. When you were a railroad employee, they did that exactly. The Canada Revenue Agency made that form specifically for railroad employees. And then just said, hey, well, the railroad employees, now we'll just include trucking in it. And that's where the origin of that form came from. But anyway, so that major change put the reimbursement for meal expenses under the direct control of Canada Revenue Agency, not an employer-employee anymore. And if you want to go online and take a look at how good they have been managing that, there's the red chart and a blue chart, and the blue chart is approximately 7 to 8 times the size of the red, and the red is the TL2, and the blue is the historical non-taxable benefits or meal allowance forms, and so the two different systems worlds apart. But anyway, that's what happened in the trucking industry, moving to a deregulation. There was other moves too. Other industries moved, like the farming. Everything used to, like farmers used to, you can't sell your grain to anyone other than the wheat board years ago, and it took a number of tries through the parliament and the like, and eventually now all farmers just sell their wheat to whomever they want, and they can keep it, they can sell it, they can sell it in Canada, they can sell it in the United States, they can do anything they want, and it doesn't have to go through any wheat board. And that is a big debate. For the most part, it opened them up to the free market, which means that they can make much more money, but there's also at times where they could lose money because the wheat is far too low, or whatever they're
now
growing.
there'd be more risk.
Yeah, more risk. So you need to be much more educated farmer now.
Yeah.
You have to know what's coming and going because you're in the free market now, right? But anyway, that's another situation where the government separated themselves from an entire industry. So first did the trucking, and then the farming was like that, and that's a form of tax revolt. Now, some people might look at it and say, oh, no, it's all capitalism and stuff like this. Yeah. But when government removes itself from the direct control over an industry, they are moving into the industry is moving into a free market system, and they can make much more money, and they can they're exposed, of course, to risks.
My little view on that is the government, if the government is in there regulating everything, they take a lot of risk out of it, but they also take a lot of them
return.
Somebody's
as well.
got to skim off of the.
Yeah, and
the government knew they were making good money, and trucking became, when they deregulated it became a huge industry to get into because you could make huge money. Yeah, but in the cycle, there's a lot
to lose.
Yes, and the government just said, here, you do that, and then the farming also. You see that in the U.S. Like there's huge farms in the U.S. And every once in a while, I've talked to a few of them. I've delivered machinery and whatever, and the margins are getting smaller and smaller, and in order to make the same amount of money, they have to increase the size of their farms.
Yeah.
They're forced to, because they can't maintain. And I would imagine that's the same as some of the bigger trucking companies. You can't, to lock
Economies
in
of scale.
with 100 trucks 20 years ago, you made X dollars. Now you don't make that. You don't make even that same percentage. You don't. Those margins are whittled down.
Well, a lot depends on the freight rates, so that can go up and down. The margins can be huge, and the margin can be little. The trucking industry is very, very different in that it is one of the few industries that actually have diseconomies of scale. The larger you get, the less efficient you actually become. It's
true.
I mean, I know some people would argue about that, but realistically, it is absolutely true.
You'd have to have more overhead.
Yeah, overhead is a huge factor.
Yeah.
I wrote an article a while back, a couple of weeks or a month or two ago, where I know a lot of companies, probably off the top of my head, 4 or 5, 6 of them, where the husband is out driving, the wife is in the basement, and doing the paperwork and doing about half the dispatching, and the driver out on the road is dispatching, and they got 10, 12, 15, 20 trucks, and that business has virtually no overhead at all, nothing, and whereas the big companies that could have hundreds and hundreds of trucks or so, well, they got a $10 million yard and a $20 million head office, and don't tell me that doesn't add 11, 12%. That it doesn't take it off of their profit. You have to pay for that somewhere, and you don't make it up very much in other areas. So you have a maintenance shop. But in order to get that maintenance shop to be efficient, you have to plow things through there at just the right rate, and you have to have that thing squeaky clean operating. You have to. There's all sorts of there is little need to have 14-foot ceilings and carpet and glass this and brass that in order, because that doesn't bring any revenue.
That's right,
I mean, it makes it maybe it affects morale, but not necessarily. In the end, it's money that evaporates sometimes, and that's a little bit North American. But administration, that's big. Anyway, we're a little off topic. Taxes is what we're really talking about. So let's say the first real move, or should I say, tax revolt, came in the 70s, and it came to reduce taxes, and there was a little bit of reduction of taxes, but not really. Because prior to that, a lot of there was manufacturing taxes and all sorts of stuff, and that was all hidden. You didn't see a lot of this stuff. The consumer didn't see anything, and so the first sort of tax revolt was in the late 70s, and all the way through the 80s, and there was a pushback. A little bit as well, because in 1992 there was the GST that came into Canada, and that was supposed to solve all of the problems with it when it comes to tax, because I think it was 7% to start off with, and it was supposed to eliminate a whole bunch of stuff. Now there were some things that eliminated, like there was what's called a manufacturing tax, which nobody ever saw. Only manufacturers actually paid for it. If you added value at all in any process, you had to put in a tax into, which is ridiculous. But anyway, they got rid of that, and they got the GST, which is a consumption tax, and I'm actually I'm okay with a GST for the simple reason, from a business perspective, you get all the GST back, and so from a business perspective, GST should be it's a non-burger. It doesn't it shouldn't affect anything.
Well, it would almost equate to the it's a consumption tax. Which is the most efficient. Should be,
and realistic. A business doesn't consume.
Right.
It charges
Yeah.
and it does consume,
Yeah.
but it charges and then it offsets, so you
Yeah.
you get the difference between the two. Now,
You said in the 70s, things were deregulated.
the
And a lot
starting of the
or
deregulation.
starting, yeah. How much of that, in your estimation? Because I look back and I see a little bit of a different clause there, because the world started becoming much more interconnected as far as computers. Like, instead of having to compete just in Manitoba,
Yeah.
our scales now had to compete all over there, and you can't stay regulated here and naturally compete somewhere else. So they were forced to open doors and allow that offload the competitive from the government, put it onto the small guys, let them work it out.
That's a good point. That you could say that NAFTA, for instance, prepared. Like the preparation for NAFTA and deregulation prepared us to compete with the United States.
Right. Yeah.
And over the next 2 or 3 decades, we now not only had to compete with United States, but now manufacturing in Mexico and China and
overseas. Yeah.
So then there became this global competitor aspect. Maybe not in trucking, obviously, but in manufacturing and stuff like that. So competition did spread out, absolutely, and regulation causes expenses to be so high you can't compete. And regulation comes from government, and you have to get government out of your life in order for you to be efficient.
So because of the, I guess, the internationalization of everything, that's kind of protected us from overregulation.
I believe it's forced the government's hand to start releasing. And part of I got a little pet peeve with our farmers, like the dairy farmers and the chicken. We have quotas.
That's
a horrible system.
Side.
All the farmers love it. Why? Because
it protects them.
All their safety nets are around them. They're locked in. And I know I know a few farmers, and they say even with regulation and the systems they have, things are getting extremely tight. Like, who isn't right now?
Yeah.
But they can haul
tight sometimes is a relative term too.
Yeah, they're just not making as much as they used to.
They can't go to Hawaii twice a year, only once.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. That's
yeah. But you know what?
It's
the free market system has its positive and negative, and I know our let's talk. My thing is about the let's talk our dairy and eggs. Okay, they're both very regulated. If you take our product and compare it to an American product, there is a huge difference. We have a far superior product in my estimation.
You're talking chickens.
Chicken?
That is a taste. Like, you mean the difference between white meat and yellow meat? Because you get yellow chicken in the States.
Yeah.
That's because they feed it corn.
Yes.
And then here in Canada, we feed it grain.
Right.
That's just a taste. Nutrition-wise, it's identical, though. I don't know. Now we're getting into hairiness. Different things. But let's get back to the tax issue.
Yeah.
But taxes are... they go in waves. Like, for instance, when you get to the point where the people start chafing and they say tax, and then tax goes down. In the 70s and 80s, I remember a friend of mine who was selling RSPs during that time. And I remember I was with him when somebody walked by and he was talking about RSPs. And he says, "Why would I buy an RSP to save myself taxes when I want to retire in 30, 40 years from now, and the taxes then are going to be higher than they are now?"
Mm-hmm.
Back then, the mentality was taxes never go down.
Right.
They will always go up.
Yeah.
And the truth is, there's a lot of people who would love that to be true, but realistically the market would never be able to bear it because there is a saturation point. where the people just say, that's enough. We have had it, and something has to change. And there's a huge move. I believe we're right in the middle of is one of the biggest tax revolts in Canadian history. And the carbon tax is just a huge issue.
See, that's where I guess my mind frame goes back is we are saturated with taxes, but because the world market is closing in on us, they can't control it like they used to. Like we used to be able to buy local products and support local, and when now local stuff is so expensive. You go to the big box store and you can get something from a long ways overseas that's shipped thousands of miles, and you can get it for 40% of what you buy local. And that bugs me.
Well, and that's not true with everything, though.
No.
And the best example where it's not true with is eggs. Eggs are way, way cheaper if you go buy them locally from somebody. But that's because all the regulation is evaded.
That's a regulated. What do they call that?
You have to divert the regulated system.
Yeah. It would be the same thing with milk.
If you can find it, that's
now you can't even buy milk. I remember we grew up with milk, like real farm milk that actually tastes like farm. Now I haven't drank milk I had cereal a few days ago, but other than that, I don't drink milk. Who drinks milk? It's chalk, it's white chalk. Anyway, now again we're all good rabbit trail, but there are times when the saturation of taxes irritates the general public. And sometimes it's the saturation of the people, and sometimes it is the global market. Like we used to have in Canada, corporate taxes up in the 40% plus. And now, depending on which province you're in, if you take out the small side, it's anywhere between 28 and 35. That's where United States and Canada, and actually they sort of probably all had a meeting and say, listen, we got to bring our corporate taxes down. Or probably bullied by United States or something like that. Probably by what I think it was Ronald Reagan, but it could have been somebody after that, where they brought corporate taxes down in there. So sometimes it's the citizens that cry high taxes we're doing, and sometimes it's the global impact saying, listen, if we want to compete corporately at all, then we got to bring our taxes down.
You see big corporations, more in the States than in Canada, but big corporations in the States, they move from state to state to save corporate taxes.
Back when I was driving truck, a great example of this, I went to a wheel manufacturing plant in Ontario. So my wife got in there. Wife and I got there. We backed up to the door and looked in there, and you get these, these fancy rims and stuff like this, and they were making them at the thing. And I went in there because it was cool. I wanted to see all the different designs. And I was talking to the guy. Oh, this is pretty cool. And he said, yeah. He says, in 30 days, this is all gone. I said, what do you mean? He says, and he was complaining about NAFTA. So it would have been in the 90s. And he says, NAFTA basically made it impossible for us to survive here, and they're closing up the business and they're reopening it in Mexico. And so the regulation, or it became, the wages were too high in Canada. The costs of the plant and everything like that was too high in Canada, so they moved it. And that does happen. And quite frankly, if there was any income, the corporate tax rate would have been too high in Canada too. So in order for a country to be competitive, they have to be relatively the same as the other countries that they're trading with. And so there is out of country pressure to keep taxes down. But what I'm actually wanting to talk about, or what we're talking about today here, is taxes within Canada for the consumer. I did a short podcast. It was just by myself, and the point that I made on it is young people nowadays can't own their own home, and it's primarily not because corporate theft or all these anti-capitalistic things. No, it has to do almost entirely. It's not competitive because the taxes to live are just grossly too high. Yes, there are housing prices that have tripled and doubled and stuff like this, but that's because government either fails to act or acts irresponsibly, and it's the government's interference that causes our woes. Mm-hmm. That's really the entire point of what I'm trying to say here today. And realistically, they just think up new ways to tax the Canadian citizen and the Canadian businesses. What any organization does, it should be doing over its lifetime, is evaluating why it does things. Why exactly are there taxes? What is the purpose of taxing? For instance, like I was saying, I really enjoy a consumer tax like the fuel tax. It's a user tax. A GST is because you're consuming it. Yep. Those kind of things. But there are hundreds and hundreds of other taxes that are absolutely ridiculous. Like we all own houses, and sometimes, like I have some rental property and every citizen who owns a property has to pay property taxes. Now, what exactly are they getting for that property taxes? Are they getting any type of value? Probably they're thinking not. But one thing that really ticked me off more than anything, and maybe it's because I'm too detail-oriented, but I remember a few years ago I looked at my property tax. And basically, there's a mill rate. Pretty much everybody does it the same with just different numbers. You take the mill rate and the valuation of your property, and you multiply the two, and you get a dollar figure. And that's supposed to be your property tax. Now, what my experience is they also have these other addendums, other little additions. And sometimes it is a local improvement where they pave the road in front of you, or they do something special. The city or the town or the municipality does something, and they bill the owners of that property to pay for it all. Which, somebody else chooses to spend our money. That's how it feels. Yeah. And you get people getting pretty ticked off with that. Now, in one of my property taxes, like I was saying a few years ago, there are improvements for this and this and this. Maybe some have garbage pickup and delivery, all sorts of different things, and they itemize some of this stuff. There was one line on my property tax, and it was like X17523. There's a whole bunch of alphanumeric things, on there, and then it had a number on the side. Is $22 and whatever 16 cents or something. And I thought, what in the world is that thing for? So I called up the city and I said, well, what is this? Well, him and haw didn't give me an answer. I said, look, I'm not going to hang up until I actually get the number. What exactly is this? And it's an administration fee for blah, blah, blah. And I had to go 3 or 4 times, 2 or 3 times probably, but the third time, finally they said, it has to do with the cost of sending out your property tax bill. And I said, what in the world? You mean the mailing of it? Yes. So in other words, wouldn't that be included in just general administration? It's sort of like going to Walmart, and you're walking down and you say, hey, there's a T-shirt for $12. Hey, that's a good price. Go take the price and go over to the till, and you're going to pay $12 for it. And they say, okay, it's $35. Oh, what in the world? It says $12. Oh, yeah, but that's $12. But then there is a stocking fee for $10, and then there's a till fee for $12, and then there's this fee and that fee and that fee, and then there's tax on top of that. Well, that's all hidden there. Nobody does that in the real world, but they do that in government.
I think you should be careful, or else Walmart might start doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. They couldn't legally, I don't think they could do that, could they?
I have no idea.
I don't know, but the government has these unbelievable ways of taxing people and making it sound so incredibly logical. Oh, no, this is how we do it. But realistically, the cost of mailing out my property tax bill is a separate line item in my property tax that doesn't go to the mill rate, and yet they have these big, out in the paper, we kept our mill rate it was stable as last year, Well, thank you, but what are all the line items underneath?
Yeah, that deception thing it's kind of funny. I just came across something like that yesterday. I went and got my car oil changed. I figured, first, I just
got an environmental levy?
No, I didn't. I went in there, and I hadn't been to one of these quick change for years. Like I've always, whatever. And I asked them, it's basic oil change, $129. Oh, okay, let's go with that. Yeah, let's do it. And because that includes everything.
Yeah.
Yep, that includes everything. Okay, I get in there, and they're doing their thing, and he says, well, okay, your bill is $200. And I'm going, What? Yeah, because your basic oil change is based on 5 liters.
That's right. Yeah.
Everybody takes more than 5 liters. So you have to pay over and
unless
above.
you have like a 3-cylinder engine or something.
Yeah. So I had to buy 3 extra liters. And there was one more thing that I could. So I'm going, holy smokes, maybe I'm going to do my own oil changes again.
That's a little deceptive advertising. It's not really bait and switch.
No, it's not.
There is an actual marketing term for that. But the same feeling that you get when that happens to you is what we all get when you see your tax bill. It's just, wait a minute, what in the world?
I'm willing to pay my share, not a problem.
Yeah,
well,
but not everybody else's.
No.
Well, the worst part is when you sit down and think about what you're actually getting for the amount of tax you're paying.
Yes.
Yeah. Here's my theory, and I want to start heading in this direction with this. I want to talk re-engineering. I said there is a need for Canada to re-engineer the government, not just the federal, also the provincial, city, and municipal. And I'm of the theory that 40 to 50% of all services that the government is paying for right now can be eliminated. And in my opinion, they could probably take out 30, 35%, and we wouldn't even notice it. The average individual go, they took 35%? How in the world? What did you mean?
Yeah.
Our lives will go on identical, wouldn't move at all. But probably from 35 to 50%, then we have to say, okay, now we're going to have to live without this or without that or without.
With a compromise.
Okay, I'm used to them doing this. Now, you know what? I'll do it.
Yeah.
And because there's no sense in a government doing something like that, but I'll accept not to. Those are big questions for a country to ask. And realistically, that's what re-engineering is. It's not tightening your belt and get a 5% savings and stop overspending and stuff like this. Re-engineering is a complete overhaul, a re-questioning of everything that we do and why we do it, and if we even have to do that. That is revolutionary. I studied a fair bit of re-engineering, in, of course, at the master's level, but I'm a huge fan of Dr. Edward Deming. I'm a huge fan of his book Out of the Crisis, and that book really it's probably one of the 5 books that I would say changed my life. In that you think why you're doing what you're doing and whether you are actually producing something of value or you're not. One of the greatest illustrations that's in the book has to do with pollution. And during this, they were environmental pollution. You want to the exhaust from automobiles. You want to bring it down. And during the I guess the 60s, the environmental movement started to clean up Detroit, that kind of thing. And so what Detroit did, the legislations, you were only allowed a certain parts per million in exhaust out of everything that comes off of the manufacturing line. And so to accommodate that exact figure, they said, well, really what they did was they put attached air pumps onto the engines, put them into the exhaust, so that they would have airflow being pumped into the exhaust, so that when the guy at the end out the tailpipe would measure the exhaust, there would be way more air than there was dirty particles. And in the book, he says, well, listen, are you actually accomplishing anything? Of course not. No. If anybody bought a vehicle in the 70s, like late 70s or so, the first thing they do is you go on there and you unhook that and throw it out and get rid of it, because it only makes things worse. It doesn't make anything better. And there was a whole bunch of examples like that where you're trying to fix something and you're just looking at a number, and then that number means absolutely nothing. And oftentimes that's what's happening with government. One department will do this to get this number, the other department will do that to get that number, and then together they say, look how much we've done, and actually they've done absolutely nothing. And it is high time for a country, not just an organization, not just a business, but an entire country to evaluate why are they doing stuff. The entire trucking industry right now they got so low margins, and so they're asking pertinent questions. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Is it actually bringing value? Does it help us to stop losing money, so to speak? We do that in business all the time, but nobody does it for the governments, because the governments don't have any pressure other than the people saying, stop it with the taxes. And then the elected officials have to say, okay, well, now we're going to have to do something, so we'll save the we'll save the budget 2% or 3% or something like that until the yelling and screaming stops, and then they go back and then they jump it by 5 or 8% or something like that. It's ridiculous. And realistically, forget all of this 2 to 5%. Now you look at 40 to 50%. Okay, if we want to become a global, not a powerhouse. We'll never be shouldn't say a powerhouse, because nobody wants to be. You should never attain to be a powerhouse, but a global competitor. Realistically, we have unbelievable resources in our country, but it's the government that stops us from being efficient. It's the tax system that hamstrings everybody from doing anything really, truly productive. So it's the government that's the problem, and it's their taxation problem. And the only way to do that is say, okay, you know what? Question why even do anything. Why is there a tire tax? Get rid of the thing. There's no reason for it. Why the environmental levy? Is it really cleaning up the environment? No, it's not. It's just putting it into the general fund so some government official can have a nicer desk. That's maybe a little condescending.
They just create another department, and all that money just runs that department to manage their own finances, and it becomes a self-sustaining circle. It really doesn't. If
it would go towards building the country's wealth, I'd be okay with that. But it's not.
I heard an astronaut once talking about NASA, and he said the biggest issue with NASA is that there's no motivation to achieve anything, because the second they achieve something, it's like, why are they being funded? So, for example, like going back to the moon and putting people on the moon. Well, if they were to achieve going back to the moon in say 2024, well, what's the mission for 2025? Like, there's no need to continue funding to go to the moon if they actually achieve it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And that's a difficult, I mean, there is ways for countries to re-engineer. Like there's many our countries re-engineer all the time. It takes sometimes half a century. Like for instance, in 1940, when Hitler invaded Poland and Canada went to war, the entire country re-engineered. Told that story of Penner Tire here in Blumenort. I don't know if it's one of my favorite stories. I'll say it here anyway. Canada was at war, not the United States, but Canada was at war because we were associated with Britain, and they said rubber's going to be a major issue, and so that means there's going to be what do they call that? Moratorium or everything is restricted with rubber, and so the government said we're buying 90% of all of your inventory of tires, and they sent letters out to every single tire shop and supplier and sales people in Canada. And so everybody start packing up, and they gave market rate or close to market rate. So they said, no, this is a rule now, you have to do it. And everybody sends it off. But this guy in Blumenort from J.D. Penner or so, I don't know whether that's his, probably that's his full name, but anyway, he's not around obviously anymore. But anyway, all of his other friends who were in the tire business, they said, hey, how come you're not sending your tires in? So, well, why am I doing it? I just got a letter. If they really want my tires, they can come and pick them up. But I'm just not going to do anything, And so a month goes by, and everybody sends their tires in. They get their check, and everything's fine. And then a new letter comes out and says, now, whenever you need to buy a tire, you have to first send in a copy of the invoice that you sold a tire. So if you sell a tire, then you are able to replace your inventory. So just eliminated 90% of the inventory of all of the tire shops in Canada. And that's re-engineering, by the way. I mean, in a backwards way, obviously. But JD never heard of any, nobody ever contacted him anything more about his inventory. So war's starting and was going on, and life on the prairies where, everybody started needing tires eventually, and nobody had any tire inventory except for JD. And for the entire war period, JD cornered the entire southern Manitoba region because he had a humongous, it was an average inventory before, but now he had basically 10 times what everybody else had, and so he could afford to have all of these different tire sizes and stuff like this, and he cornered the market, and he did extremely well. But when a country goes to war, like we did in 1940, obviously we re-engineer. We stop doing what we're doing, and we question why we're doing everything. We shouldn't, as a country, we should not have to go to war to question why we're doing stuff.
Right.
We're just doing some, governments are building governments just for the sake of building governments. And at some point in time, the taxes become so burdensome that we have to say, let's not wait for a war to re-engineer. Let's become efficient right now and cut out all of the dead stuff, because there's a lot of stuff that the government does that it was very pertinent 30, 40 years ago before technology. Yeah. Now, there's absolutely no need for it anymore at all. But they keep on doing it because, they've always done it that way, Taxes, and it all affects the taxes. And if our tax rate could come down 30-40%. Just think, even like regular jobs that young people can work on, they would be able to save for a down payment way faster if they have 30% more margin on because of their taxes. Yeah, I mean, it's huge amount.
It's huge.
And the interesting thing about that is the government's solution is always, we'll just raise the minimum wage a little bit. Right? So when people are struggling, They want, instead of, looking at the tax rate, they just do what they've always done, which is, we'll just bump the minimum wage up a little bit more. That way the government
Nobody can buy a house on minimum
No,
wage.
of course not. No. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. The thinking is ridiculous. Actually, you hear that California increased their minimum wage to $20 an hour?
Wow.
Well, that's ridiculous. Yeah. Like, who works at McDonald's? Nobody anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine how much it's going to cost in a Big Mac in California.
And usually people working at McDonald's aren't the type of people that are going to buy houses.
No.
They're usually people in
a McDonald's job.
School.
I worked at McDonald's. I worked there, 3 years or whatever.
Yeah.
Great time. But I was in high school at the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's where you learn how to work.
Mm-hmm.
It's whether it's McDonald's or Wendy's or Tim Hortons or whatever, it doesn't make any difference. If a person that works at a job at a fast food place, generally speaking, under most circumstances, it's not a lifetime job.
No.
You are there for 2, 3, 5, 6 until you should be working your way up into a leadership position. Yeah. So you know how to work with the production and work with people, and your value increases, and then you can get, boy, this is not going to be very popular, then you can get a real job. Mm-hmm. And you deal with and now you have higher, that's you learn at the lower paying rates so you can go up higher. Yeah. But now if the minimum wage goes up, then the young people how do I say this? If you have young people, they need experience to work, but they're not getting experience because now you don't have nearly as much hiring from those organizations as before, and now you got kids coming out of high school and even college who have zero work experience and have some of the most ridiculous work ethics and productivity ethics. Like, it's embarrassing. I know. It's sad to say the least. But realistically, it's very short-term thinking of government to just raise minimum wage. Yeah. How are you going to train your children? How are children going to learn the basic essentials of young learning earning in order to build your compound competence up to get a real job? Like, it is really nasty, backwards thinking. But I mean, we have to somehow or other get governments to think differently and trust the open market a lot more. They have trusted it in trucking. They have trusted it in farming. There's other areas that have been opened up, but healthcare is a humongous area. A humongous employer in Canada, and realistically, it's all government controlled and operated. Yeah. You can't get any experience in healthcare unless you work for the government. Yeah. And it's a nasty thing. Realistically, if Canada is going to be able to reduce its tax burden, it has to do very significant changes to the healthcare system. Yeah. And that means maybe open up, so that MRIs, so that CAT scans, so that a whole bunch of things can be done in the private sector. Yeah. And then you maybe get young people getting experience in an industry, and you can work their way up in there. Otherwise, I mean, nobody gets shot out of high school or college and immediately gets thrown into leadership of a division of a large company or something like that. You have to work your way, start at the bottom and work your way up. At least that's how history has always done it.
Even in the medical system in Canada, there's really no incentive to become more productive, because
if you don't have a competitor,
if you don't have competitors, you just come in and do your shift and you go home. You don't really learn to have this compassion for people. Like in the States, like if you driven by lots of billboards where this hospital, they're advertising, we've got on average a 7-minute wait to see a doctor. What?
Yeah.
You walk in and a 7-minute.
Well,
like,
And that's part of the other thing is if you don't like your doctor, well, that sucks to be you here.
Yeah.
Nothing you
Yeah,
can do
yeah.
about
Do you
it.
know that only 60% of Canadians even have their own doctor?
Well,
40% don't even have their own doctor. They just
Yeah.
walk here and walk there
Yeah,
or whatever.
and
Our
walk-ins.
system is terrible. But then again, we're older. You're
Yeah.
not as being. You don't have the issues like we do have when you
Not
get
yet.
60. No, should.
Well, we yeah, and as far as
You-
abilities,
Yeah.
Canada has an amazing medical system.
Yeah.
Like if you're in
they have
any kind of trauma,
people, for sure.
top notch around the world, you can get anything and everything done. But if the government just decides how important your medical issue is.
Well, and-
that's the problem.
And to get
Yeah.
something done, you actually have to have a doctor first,
Yeah.
yeah,
which I don't have a doctor.
no,
And that's because
My
he was
doctor
fired.
is still on leave. I'm supposed to have my right shoulder. I've been waiting a year and a half, and my doctor isn't back yet, so I have to now find another doctor to put it. Like I mean, it's not urgent, but realistically, I want to get it done before I'm 65 because when I'm 75, I don't want to go through the operation. I had my left one done, and it works fabulous. But now to get my right done, I have the luxury of a few years to wait and stuff like that, and it's not super painful. But it will be a huge issue when I'm 75, 80,
Yeah.
and unless I get it fixed now. So I mean, I'm definitely doing it now. But I mean, it's sort of like standing in line. I remember this joke. This guy in Russia got a whole bunch of money, and he says, "Oh my goodness, now I'm going to buy a car." And so he says, "Oh, okay." So he goes out, and I guess he was buying a Lada because that's all they had back then. Just an old joke, but anyway, he had to get a Lada and went through all the process, and he said, okay, all right, when can I have it? And he says, well, it's 7 years, 4 months, and 62. It's July 15th, 2032 or something like that. He says, what? You get that long wait of time? Are you kidding? And he says, no, it's July, whatever I said, 14th or whatever it is. And he says, oh, man, is it going to be available in the morning or in the afternoon? He said, what do you mean in the morning or afternoon? Well, I got a plumber coming in the morning. Well, we somehow get accustomed to the fact that we have to wait for ever to get something done, and then you get a unbelievably short wait period down the States.
Yeah.
Now, their cost factors are different too.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you listen to U.S. politicians and advocates down there saying, we want our single-payer health care system and like Canada or Cuba or something like this, the first thing I always say is, have you ever been here? Do you even know what you have to deal with? Their standards are so high down the States. Their expectations are so high.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea what you're actually walking into? I mean, if you got 7 or 8 minute wait, and even if it's 20-minute wait, okay?
Yeah.
I don't go there if I don't go to a local thing and expect anything less than 5 hours.
Yeah.
If I go there for a hangnail, I know I'm going, okay, I might as well bring a book because
almost right off your day.
yeah, you write the whole day off.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any difference if there's nobody even in there.
Yeah.
You still wait.
I remember talking. I went to a place in, I think it was Michigan, Wisconsin. It was a warehouse in Wisconsin, and it was lunch break, and they weren't unloading me, so I went and talked with the guys, and they were whining and complaining about their medical, and I just stood there, and I was quiet, and I was listening to what they were talking about, and I understood that they have, well, comparatively, like, we've got the hidden cost of medical. They have the upfront cost of medical, and if you've got to throw out, what did they say, $600-700 a month, something like that, for their that's like
You see it. Yeah.
you see it right there, right? And then all of a sudden the one guy says, "Hey, you're a Canadian. You know about this?" I said, "Yeah, I do." And I was kind of hesitant, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, guys. If you're in Canada, we have comparable medical as you do. Okay? We don't have the upfront visual costs. The government is taking care of it, but they decide what you can get done or not. And they were quiet. What do you mean? Well, if they don't think a certain blood test is relevant for your condition, you can't get it done. And I said, you can't even pay for it if you want it done. And then they were quiet. What? What do you mean? And then I just a few things, and that lunch break room was quiet. Like in the States,
Yeah.
if you have money, you can get anything done.
Yeah.
Anything. In Canada, if you have money, you can go to the States and get anything done.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to cross the border,
Yeah.
and you can.
Yeah.
It's
Because I know there, I had an issue with my shoulder. Yeah, this was before I had my shoulder done, and there was I was supposed to get an MRI, and it was a year and a half out,
Oy.
and it was hurting me, and my doctor says that's fast line. I can't push anymore. This is what, so I spent the big dollars. I went to the States, got an MRI, came back, gave it to my doctor. Now can we get it fixed? He looked at me and he says, let's get it done right away. Two reasons. One, he knew now that I was
serious.
in pain. Like I needed to get this done. And he hadn't heard of anyone going south to do this. Like you just don't go to
Yeah.
But yeah, we've got an incredible system that works as long as you're on your deathbed, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, there's another thing too.
extremes.
This is local. This hit home
Yeah.
just in the last couple of months. The what do you call it? The existing government today, whatever their parties are, they passed this medical thing, dental and and other stuff, and that went through the pipeline or whatever. And some people use it. It's actually it's underutilized. Okay, but I had a friend who actually went to get some cleaning and some dental stuff done, and he says in the last 3 months, the prices that he had to pay for it doubled. And he says, well, he asked the guy, why? He says, it all has to do with the new legislation, because now they have to increase their rates so they get paid by the government rather than whatever. It's an insurance thing, you know. It's no different with it. And I thought, oh my goodness! Now the rest of us who either don't want to use the government thing, or so we have to pay higher because of that. So it's forcing the government to pay out excessive things.
That also
cheaper.
happens
That's
in
horrible.
the States. I talked to a guy, or I know of a guy who had to get some fairly serious blood tests or some sort of thing done, and when he went to the doctor, the place, they asked him, "Is this under your insurance?" And the guy says, "Well, what does that matter?" He says, "Well, is it with insurance, or are you paying it yourself?" Oh, what's the price difference? What's the difference for my cost? Well, it was cheaper for him to pay it outright than pay it through through his insurance. Through his insurance was $100 more. Less you have a deductible with your medical. Or
That
with your,
a lot of insurance companies,
and so it was
pharmaceutical does a lot of
Yeah.
stuff like that. There's a lot of shenanigans in the
so
pharmaceutical industry. Like
it's
that.
cheaper to pay it out of pocket, and then your premiums don't go up, and like it's
horrible.
really I don't know.
I know it's even for years. If you have a dental plan, you know they bill one way, and if you don't have a dental plan, well, this is our open
our
market
rates for
price.
this and our rates for that.
It's I mean, so whether it's an insurance policy or whether it's the government or whatever, that's it shouldn't be like that. But
And as far as the Canadian, what we are actually paying for medical in Canada, are there any numbers that say,
you know what the biggest problem in Canada is? If you look at the amount of hospitals per capita in the States,
yeah,
versus hospitals per capita here, we are a fraction of them. Like I can't remember the name of these, going by memory. Shouldn't put this on a podcast or whatever. But it's like 1/7 or 1/10 of the amount of hospital and hospital cares
yeah,
in Canada per capita than it is in the States. They just have far more accessibility down the States, and a little bit would have to do geographically. We are very, very we don't have a dense population, and we have a massive size, and we have empty fields everywhere. That has something to do with it, but in the end, I mean, realistically, for a city that has 40,000-50,000 people, to have one hospital is normal. But for the States, there's never you could hardly get that past anybody. Everybody says, "Oh, we're all dying here." So their expectations are just way, way higher. They have no clue what they're asking for when they're asking for a single payer.
Are there places where you can find out what does the government have accountability as far as medical?
No,
in any way.
They don't manage by the numbers compared to the United States. They manage by people's expectations. And the more people scream, well, then they start doing something. But if people don't scream, well, then they pare back and they do what they want to do. That's not just from the medical industry. That's all government. All government. They only move when people start yelling and screaming. And I personally hope this huge movement, this anti-carbon tax thing, is just the start. If they would suddenly, Alexa, and just wipe out the carbon tax, man, that is nothing. That doesn't even start. That doesn't even scratch the paint on the real problem. The real problem is all of the hundreds and thousands of different departments and departments of departments that need to be eliminated in order to be efficient. Because there's so much government. You never underestimate the inefficiency of a government. And realistically, I know a little bit about re-engineering, like I said before, and efficiency, because realistically, our firm, you're in tech, our firm automates our business, and we are actually engineering. Or should I say, rethinking and re-engineering an entire process. Now, it's very, very specific to be independent operators in Canada, and it's highly focused in what we do. But there's a lot of things, just from an accounting perspective, that I decided like 10, 12 years ago. I said, there's absolutely no need to do this. We're just not even going to do this. For example, if you're an independent operator, take your books to a CPA. A CPA firm will give you your statements. You got your balance sheet, your income statement, and they give you what's called a statement of changes in financial position. Okay. Now, what that actually says is, where did your money go? Did your cash go to an asset? Did you go to receivables? Did you go to payables? It's supposed to give you a breakdown of that. In the independent operator industry, there is virtually zero need for that, because you ask any independent operator where his cash went, and he can only answer in 2 or 3 different ways. Did it go into his truck? Did it go into receivables, or did it go into payables? There's basically it. And they instinctively know approximately where that is. And to provide a statement of changes in financial position to an independent operator is useless. It takes 10 to 12 minutes first of all, to explain what it is. And then in the end, if they catch on, they'll say, well, this is useless. Oh, you're absolutely right. Well, then I just said 10, 12 years ago, I said, let's not even pretend it's even there. And we just don't even provide it all. And you have to understand what's important to an operator and what's not. Yeah. And take all the stuff that's not and just, let's not confuse the issue anymore. Just use that. Just use what is really important. KPIs, they call it, key performance indicators. Those, you focus on the real issues. And whereas the government doesn't have key performance indicators, because there's nobody overseeing. There's no urgency to ask why they're even doing what they're doing. And like there's many things that can be streamlined to make things way better than what they actually are. Mm-hmm. But that would mean that government jobs would be eliminated. And there's too much pressure on elected officials from various organizations and related industries to say, no, just keep those jobs or keep those positions, keep that department open because I need some money to go to Hawaii. That's maybe condescending statement, but realistically, when an organization is so administrative and bureaucratically bloated, it actually becomes a cancer to the economy of any country. It's
because at this point in time, if like what you're saying, 30-40%, if that was done rapidly, that would be detrimental to our economy right now.
No, I mean, not necessarily.
Well, 20, just for, you'd have 20, 30, who knows how many, that percentage of the population would be out job hunting. Yeah. Who's going to pay for their unemployment? Well, the rest of us are going to do that. Well, they had a job. We were paying.
But they were doing nothing. They were not. They weren't doing anything.
They were just recycling money.
When it comes to re-engineering, there on the global stage, there is one country that truly is showing what re-engineering really is, and that's Argentina. What's that guy's name? I keep thinking it's Julio Iglesias. It's not him. No. It's the guy with the weirdest haircut. He's got a Beatles haircut or whatever. But anyway, that guy was elected. He's got 60% of the population behind him, 40% not. And within 3 months, he actually balanced the budget. Mm-hmm. And yes, he got rid of 50,000 government jobs. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so there's huge wave of unemployment. Mm-hmm. Okay? But they had unemployment in the general population anyway. And those people were supposed to be paying the other wages. So he balanced the budget in 3 months, which is absolutely phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Now, there's probably huge tsunami, I would call it a counterattack, where people are going to go against Argentina because they don't want governments to be reduced. It's up to the future a little bit whether they're going to succeed or not. But realistically, if he stays on course, it should do Argentina amazingly well. They will start seeing a rebound. I mean, if we don't do something now, in 2, 10, 20 years from now, we have to do something like Argentina. Our debt level is too high. Our administration is strangling our children and our grandchildren, and that we have to do something. If we don't do it now, it is going to be forced on us at some point in the time in the future. Our currency is going to be devalued to nothing. Whatever it is, it's there. If we don't be responsible now, if we aren't responsible now, it's going to be forced on us in the future. And I think we should take Argentina as an example of what Canada could do. Mm-hmm. We may not use the words that he does, but we're much more reserved, I guess you would say. Yeah. But realistically, let's not just stop at the carbon tax if they're going to get rid of the carbon tax. There is an unbelievable amount of government that we can eliminate that makes unbelievable sense to just free up the Canadian citizen to be successful. That's anyway. That is re-engineering. Now, as a conclusion, I'm going to say that what our firm, Making Your Miles Count, has done for the independent operator is actually re-engineering an entire industry, the independent operator industry. And by changing how they report to Canada Revenue Agency using a different system other than the TL2, they use now non-taxable benefits. It basically an independent operator's income tax is reduced by low of 60% to as high as 90%. And that represents about $12,000. Actually, last year our numbers were $12,500 and something dollars per client, and that is a significant change. That's a re-engineering of how the independent operator industry reports their income to Canada Revenue Agency, and we've been doing it for 18 years now. Actually, we've done longer than that, but we only started recording it in 2006. And so we've been doing it for 18 years, and we have saved the independent operator industry so far $71 million in income tax. And really, I kind of view that as a form of tax revolt. But it's not really revolt. It's a tax re-engineering, maybe a better idea. Because revolt is something as if you're doing something illegal. And what we're doing is absolutely, completely legal. You still have to defend it to Canada Revenue Agency, but it is legal. And that is something that if independent operators are sick and tired of overpaying on their taxes, well, goodness sakes, you better find out about non-taxable benefits and change how you're doing it. Re-engineer your tax preparation because it's not the individual that saves you taxes. It is the system that you use. That's what changes taxes. And anyway, that being said, that's pretty much it. Anybody else got any beefs about taxes? I guess we could be here forever talking about taxes and the like. I if it wasn't for non-taxable benefits, I would not be doing what I'm doing. If it wasn't for re-engineering the industry, I wouldn't be doing what I'd be doing. I would actually love to do Six Sigma research. That's Deming stuff. And I would love to do that. But, I mean, I do enough of that in our business that I feel satisfied. But if it wasn't for non-taxable benefits, I would be in a completely different industry. I just love saving taxes. That's what gets me up in the morning. Anyway, so this is a podcast about taxes. Hopefully we didn't discourage you. Maybe we could encourage you in saying that Canada is in a wave of anti-tax. It's an anti-tax movement, and I think it's well overdue. Even though we've had several movements in the last 50, 60 years, I think this one is probably the most vibrant, most direct. People actually say, "Wait a minute, what in the world are we doing with taxes?"
Well, it's I think the age we're in where we can ask more questions and get more answers, as opposed to years ago we'd ask the government questions and they'd give you the round squared answer, and then
you don't have to be 60. You don't like taxes either.
No, of course not. But yeah, no. Now we have all the information.
Yeah,
and it's there pretty much instantly.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference.
It does, because when you're that instant part. Today I am just ripped off and And now it doesn't take you 2 weeks to find out this information. You can find it out right like that.
Yeah.
And your motivation doesn't get worn off. You can.
It's an amazing amount that's Bingable.
Yeah.
I stopped using Googleable.
Yeah. That's right.
Bingable. Everything is Bingable.
Yeah.
Or DuckDuckGo. That doesn't work.
It doesn't
It doesn't flow off your
No.
Flows like water off a duck.
Anyway. Alrighty. Well, that's our podcast for today. Have a great trip.
Yep.
Thanks for stopping by Making Your Miles Count. For further Making Your Miles Count productions, call us at 877-987-9787 or download us at makingyourmilescount.com.